Hey everyone, it's Kenji. I'm gonna make some katsudon. So katsudon, I don't know if you saw my video earlier this week where I made katsu, but katsudon is what you make with leftover katsu, which is what this is. All right, so very simple. Like a lot of Japanese dishes, it's gonna start with a combination of dashi, soy sauce, mirin, and sake. This is a little pot that's made specifically for making things like katsudon or yakodon, or basically anything. Don means rice bowl. It's anything that goes on top of a rice bowl you're going to make in this kind of thing, although it'll work just fine in a skillet. All right, so I'm using instant dashi here. The brand is Hondashi, basically just powdered dashi, the equivalent of like, chicken bouillon instead of real chicken broth. Traditionally, dashi, you would make it with kombu, sea kelp, and katsuobushi, which is dried shaved bonito, smoked bonito. But the powder works just fine for a dish like this where there's a lot of other flavors going on. All right, so about a half cup of dashi in here. I'm making a small portion, and about a tablespoon of Japanese dark soy sauce. Chinese light soy sauce will also work. Also about a tablespoon of sake. About a tablespoon of mirin. Mirin is a sweet rice wine. If you don't have it, you can just use extra sake and a little bit of extra sugar. And finally, also a tablespoon of sugar. So very typical Japanese flavor profile. So, oops, that's a little too much sugar. Let's take something out there. Very typical Japanese flavor profile. Sweet, savory, lots of umami from that dashi. I'm just going to let this come up to a simmer. Meanwhile, I'm going to slice up some scallions. Typically I would make this dish with onions, but because I have these scallions, I'm going to use them. So the greens are going to be my garnish. I'm just going to relatively thinly slice those. I'll put them in a bowl of water. That'll keep them nice and sort of crisp and fresh when we use them. And the whites, I'm going to also relatively thinly slice. So if I was making this without, with regular yellow or white onions, those would be the part that I'm simmering in this broth right now. And I'd still use some scallions for garnish at the end. Okay, I'm just going to simmer those until they soften. It'll take a minute or so. Actually, I might pull off some of that broth. It looks like a little bit too much. Meanwhile, I'm going to take an egg. Let me taste that broth. Oh yeah, love that flavor. Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit of it in my egg. I'm going to very lightly beat the egg. Just kind of half beaten like that, you see? Now I'm going to take my katsu, my leftover katsu, and layer it on in here. Now, some people make katsu fresh just to have this dish. And you might ask yourself, why would you go through the trouble of deep frying something only to simmer it in the sauce and obviously, turn it all soft again. I'll save these two pieces for Homon. Homon, who, by the way, is already asleep upstairs in my daughter's room. He came in for story time and he didn't want to leave, so you will not see him tonight in this video. But anyhow, people might ask why you might fry something fresh and then go on to simmer it in the sauce, because you're just going to lose that crispness. The idea is that when you fry foods, what you're really doing is you are forcing water out of it, right? And the space where that water used to be, you leave behind some pockets of oil, of course, but also some air pockets. And so when you subsequently simmer a fried food or serve it in a broth, those air pockets all absorb the very flavorful broth or liquid, and so you end up with this sort of soft texture, softly textured area that is very intensely flavored. And so that's a thing that's kind of prized in a A lot of Japanese cooking, also in Chinese cooking, you'll see that happen frequently. In fact, all over Asia, you'll see foods that are fried first and then simmered or served in a broth afterwards. A classic example in Japan would be something like kitsune soba, so a fried tofu skin inside a bowl of soba noodles. Or often you'll find tempura fried and then served inside a bowl of udon or inside a bowl of soba noodles. All right, so that's going to simmer just until the chicken warms through. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this egg. We're going to pour it right on top, all over the top and kind of around the chicken. Okay, and just cover it. Yeah, so these lids, they're made with a little hole for steaming out. Absolutely unnecessary to use one of these. I use it just because I like it, I guess. I got my rice here. This is microwaved. Best way to reheat day-old rice is to microwave it. I like to, if it's especially dry, I'll sprinkle it with a little bit of water just off my fingertips before throwing it into the microwave. But this is hot and ready to go. And as soon as this egg is just kind of partially set, I'm going to pour it on top of this rice and we'll be done. There's, two schools of thought on as far as cooking the egg on here goes. Some people say you should turn the heat down as low as possible, which sometimes I do. And some people say you should keep the heat up. Right now it's at like a pretty rapid simmer, so pretty high heat. The difference is that if you do it at high heat, you end up with more of a contrast between the areas of egg that are sort of set and the egg that is still very, very runny or even almost raw. And so if you like that really sort of raw egg texture, you do it at relatively high heat like this. And so you see there's parts of egg that are set and part that are still raw like that. Whereas if you like your egg to be a little more sort of custardy, which sometimes I do, it's not a, you don't have to do it the same way every time. If you like your eggs a little more custardy, do it at a lower temperature and then your eggs will kind of set more evenly throughout. And you won't have as much of that variation. So you won't have a lot of raw uncooked egg and harder bits of egg like you do when you cook it hot. But here we go. Maybe even more than I would have liked, but no, it's all right. I think we struck a good balance between juicy and cooked here. Finish it off with some of those scallions. Alrighty. We are ready to eat with really bent chopsticks. Let me get better chopsticks. So, chicken, tender egg, nice and juicy so that it kind of soaks into the rice underneath. This is one of those things where, as it turns out, I think kind of classier families, the kind of folks who insist that you should never put any sauce or anything on your rice, would not have historically been eating this kind of food. This is like the food of, poorer people who need to make their rice more flavorful and who don't give a crap about pouring sauce on top of their rice because they're getting the second quality rice, not the very finest, most highly fragrant perfumed rice. And so they're pouring sauce over it because it's delicious and who gives a damn, right? So anyhow, Katsudon, a very nice way to eat leftovers. All right, guys, gals, non-binary pals, I will see you next time.